coming from Waldport, Oregon. It's exciting.
Wow. It's kind of neat to be able to talk to people all so far away.
Hi, April, from Agency, Missouri, by way of San Diego. For those of you on Facebook Live, welcome to our program on Lake Contrary. We're going to be starting in just a couple minutes. Thank you for joining us. Okay, we have just about 1 minute and then I'll introduce you.
Okay.
All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to St. Joseph Museum's virtual programming. This is something new that we're trying through the pandemic to connect with our audiences and community at home, both locally and what we're finding is across the United States. So that's very exciting. We're trying the new technology where we're doing virtual programs through Zoom, and we're also streaming these live on Facebook so that we can let everyone kind of have a chance to access the wonderful programming that we continue to do through the pandemic. We're mostly working from home, though sometimes we do have to go and check on things at the museum. And so we're definitely staying busy. I think some of the times we feel busier now than we did before. Today we have Gary Westcott with us, and he was gracious enough to try this new format out to do a virtual presentation. Gary is the moderator for Glimpses of the Past, St. Joseph history-oriented Facebook page that's pretty popular in the local community. And he's a local St. Joseph historian. He's done a lot of research on St. Joseph history, a lot of different topics. And I thought it would be fun to hear his most recent research on Lake Contrary, because that's a fun part of our history. So I want to welcome Gary and thank him so much for joining us. He's going to do his presentation, and if you have questions during the presentation, you can type them in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll ask Gary those questions. We are going to have your microphones turned off. If you, at the end of the presentation, want to ask a question, you can turn your microphone on and ask that question. We'll kind of leave some openings for that. And I would recommend if you go to the top right screen, there's the option to put your screen in speaker view or gallery view. Speaker view is probably going to be best so that you can see Gary's PowerPoint and his presentation. So without further ado, you are all here to hear from Gary. So Gary, go ahead and take it away, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. It's kind of new for me, so welcome to my interview or my presentation for Lake Contrary. It's been a kind of a new approach to it all. I didn't really realize that it'd been going on for like 100 years now before it closed. So this is the complete story that goes back to basically the beginning of the plat purchase on to the 100-year history of it all. So make sure I got the right screen here. It all started with Rubidoo. like everything else around here, Joe Rubidoux' son, Julius Caesar, or JC as everybody called him, got married in St. Louis in 1838, and he married the sister of Isabel, or Isidore Barada. And that name I found in the history books, and all it references is that he was on the original board of trustees with Joe Rubidoux and a number of other people in the very beginning. But come to find out, he came to Savannah like nearly everybody else in St. Joseph. He followed J.C. Rubidoux to Savannah and got one of the first tavern license and opened the first hotel in Savannah. He did that for a little while, and the place burned down right there on the square. So when it burned down, he moved to St. Joseph, and on Main Street, he ended up having a bakery and fancy groceries, I think they called it. So he just kind of spent his time around here in the early years of St. Joseph, and got everything working on it. So this is Isidore Barada. He's quite a guy, actually. His family was involved with the Nemaha half-breed tract up in Nebraska, and I think that they were kind of business associates with the Rubidouxs in the early days. Like I said, when he came to St. Joseph, he started experimenting around, looking at the area around Lake Contrary. He built the first structure there. It was a 2-story log cabin that he kind of leased out to these people named Mr. and Mrs. Dumford. Now, I think that this originally, this is what it was. I think it turned into the Maples here later on. I haven't found anything firm on that yet, but the Maples was a pretty popular place, and it was a pretty popular eatery later in the history of it all. But back when Barada had it, and the Dumfords, they were really famous for fish and frog legs and fried chicken. Everybody likes fried chicken. So here's the right spot. The unpaved roads are pretty bad in the wet weather, and so not that many people went to the lake for pleasure until the Dumfords, of course. It was really closely dense grown jungle along the banks, but they served such good food, people went down there anyway. They would take a horse and buggy down there and either go row the boat or swim or go fishing, and they'd have some dinner at the Dumfords and drive home by the moonlight. According to J.B. Moss, who I've talked about in the past, they would go down there, and it was really shaded when they went there because of the trees. But when they came back, it was so dark that they had to let the horses kind of feel their way along by themselves and just kind of trust that they were going to make it. Then they started tying these Chinese lanterns to the backs of the buggies so they could follow each other down the path back into St. Joseph. It turned into kind of like a lover's lane, though. They let the horses kind of make their own way, and while they concentrated on other things. But around 1865 is when a guy named Charles Fredericks began taking wagon loads of men from St. Joseph down to the lake to go hunting and fishing, and there was really a good spot for both. The city dwellers all got a real good taste of the outdoors in the lake at the time. This is kind of how the lake looked. It was a lot wider. It was like 10 miles long and half a mile wide at the time. It was pretty deep. But when people went out there, they got in these kind of boats and enjoyed the lotuses and lily pads and whatnot. But on Sunday, July 23rd, in 1876, this boat containing this little group of pleasure seekers went down to Lake Ontario, and 5 girls drowned. They'd gone about 3 miles and was returning, and within 100 yards of back into the shore, these little girls started reaching out. I said little girls, they were young teens. They were reaching out of the boat and they were grabbing these flowers and lotus and whatnot, and they caused the boat to capsize. In an instant, they were all like in the water. Well, the guy that was rowing them around, he was able to get them all and get their hands on the boat. But then they started trying to get into the boat again, and it capsized again, and they were all started drowning. So he tried to save his own daughter. And as he was pulling her to the shore, other girls started grabbing him around the neck. And so he had to free himself from all this. And unfortunately, all the girls drowned, and he just barely made it out with his own life. But when they finally got him back in, one of the girls was buried immediately, but the rest of them, the fire department was able to, or the fire department set up their fire wagon as a hearse, and they would go around, and they started off at the home of one of the little girls, and they put her body on the wagon, and they went to the next house, and they started this great big long procession, 150 miles worth of it. The hearse was drawn by like these 4 white horses, and it was preceded by Rosenblatt's brass band, and it was really moving. The band's wagon had these 5 little girls that each represented one of the girls that drowned, and it was a real solemn procession. And so that happened in 1876, before really anything else was going on there besides the Dumfords. But she was buried there. This is her tombstone at Mount Mora. This guy here is his name was Adolf Schroeder. He was the manager of a club that they started making down there for these sportsmen that like to go down there and go hunting and fishing and whatnot. And he started the kind of a club that he started, made it interesting for people to start going down there. And so they kind of slowly built on that until and it evolved into like a sportsman club. They called it the Budweiser House. And this is the Budweiser House. It's a predecessor of the Lotus Club. You can see by the roof line and whatnot that it looked really similar. You can see in the background the boathouse, and they had built this rooftop garden that was real popular. They go up there and drink cold beer and have dinner and do some dancing, and it became really popular. So popular that when they started introducing electricity into St. Joseph, that it caught the attention of the guy that was introducing the electricity. The guy that was he was really into the street railroad and the trolley system and the heat and steam business and all the things that went with it. His main idea was to sell electricity and rides on his trolley. And this is W.T. Van Brunt. In 1890s, he was a real entrepreneur here in town. He was into baseball, and he was the president and financial backer of the Western District. He got involved with gold mines and silver mines, and concerts, and he helped start the Lake Ontario amusement park. And he developed the steam business. The steam business, believe it or not, was kind of a byproduct of electricity generation. He used the steam to heat most of the big buildings downtown, and so that's what allowed people to develop the downtown and to make these larger buildings, is because they heated it pretty inexpensively through the steam heat that they were generating there. But anyway, Van Brunt embraced the whole idea of the Lake Ontario because, well, it would get people to ride on his trolleys to the park, and the park also uses a whole lot of electricity to keep all the lights going and whatnot. They advertised that they were going to start this club, and so they started looking for a name. And there was Miss Jessie McDonald, who was a relative of R.L. McDonald, was picked the Lotus Club for the name because it was the same kind of lotuses and lilies that grew along the Nile, and so that became the name. Groups of friends often went down to the lake on summer afternoons, and they'd row for a little while, and they'd build a fire, have some supper, row back across the lake, maybe dance a little bit, and then go on back home. So it got to be really popular with the locals. This is how the casino looked from the lake back in the early days. This is a really early photograph of the casino. It shows the pier that went out there, the swimming dock and whatnot. There's a sailboat there in place, but you can see, let's see if I can get this pointer to work. See this little bridge right here? Maybe. Can you see that? I don't know if the pointer was moving or not. Anyway, there was a bridge they built between the Lotus Club, which is shown now, and the casino, which is off to the left of it, back behind it. And the bridge would allow their guests to go from one facility over to the next one. It became a really popular part of the whole thing too. This is what it looked like in use. The entryway went back into the amusement park, and it connected the hotel to the park. As you probably know, it was a private club. It was made for the well-to-do of St. Joseph, and it gave them a place to send their families during the summer when it was really hot in the city. The kids and their wives needed something to do, and they'd send them down to the lake to cool off and enjoy the Chautauqua or the concerts or whatever else was going on. There was all kinds of social activity going on there at the time, but it was a private club, and they were pretty expensive and for people just to go hang out there. So they decided to, because it was going to use more electricity, Van Brunt decided that he wanted to make it not quite so much a private club as it was a amusement park. And so because he loved fast horses, now that was probably one of his biggest vices, apparently. He loved fast horses at a time when people were making $1 a day, $1.50 a day. He would spend $1,000. He would bet $1,000 on his horses for a particular race. And so through this love of horses, he got in touch with a guy named Palmer Clark. Palmer Clark he had started by being a telegraph operator back in Chicago. And so he also loved fast horses and started a magazine. Excuse me. He started a magazine about horse races. And I think that's how Van Brunt got to know him, but he invited Palmer Clark to come to St. Joseph to develop the Lake Venturi into more of an amusement park. He was really successful at it. But the whole idea was to sell a lot of electricity and rides to the park back and forth. They had a double track streetcar service that went from St. Joseph, all parts of St. Joseph down to the lake and back. But he also didn't want to do it cheap. He made it so you had to go to the stockyards and then transfer over to the Lake Venturi end of it to pay another fare to get on out to the lake. He's the one that introduced a lot of the different things. He brought in baseball, and there's a horse racing track, and they had the midway and the swimming and whatnot. And his idea of turning it into the park is the genesis of the whole idea of the Lake Venturi amusement park. Of course, the horse racing portion of it was his big thing. He really liked it. He actually started off with like a mile-long track, but he used the mud around Lake Contrary because it was good clay when it was dry. Of course, he found out when it got wet that it was a really rotten kind of a clay to use in a horse track. The clay would stick to the horse's hooves, and they had to strip the track and redo the whole thing, and made it half a mile because of this. This is what the ball field looked like. It was a pretty good sized ball field. And watching the bathers and swimming was a big thing. It was a really popular pastime down there. But the whole idea was to sell rides on the trolley. The trolley went all over St. Joseph, and one of the first places they went was down to Lake Contrary to supply the different guests down there. The lake looked a lot different. This is what the complex looked like back then. You can see the horse track there and the ball field and the casino. The casinos weren't really a gambling casino. They were casinos were some places where people could go and play games, board games, games that needed a lot of room, and they had dances there, and they had concerts and whatnot on the inside when they weren't using the outside facilities for the concerts. This is one of their booklets there to show the calendar of events from around 1900. This is the maples, and I think that it actually evolved from the Dumfords. It was sat right on the edge of the lake, and I've read in different books that they brought managers from the East Coast that were well-known entertainers, and they had good quality meals, and they had nice rooms and things that they could go down there and enjoy themselves a lot and have a place to stay, not quite at the lake, but almost there at the lake. That's it over on the right side of this photograph here. It's interesting that I just got another photograph of this same pier that you can see, but it don't show the lake. A photograph from the Ullman collection that I got just the other day. But this is also the pier, or one of the boat docks at Lake Contrary. There was lots of advertising about fishing. They said the water was really deep and cold and clear, nothing like it is today. But the fishing was just remarkable. There was a lot of championship sized fish that were caught there at the time. They did a lot of sailing, what they called yachts. We had championship yachtsmen here who won real trophies for some of the things, some of the speeds and races that they ran. I thought this one was pretty cool. They had a place called Ring Lover's Walk at Ring Park that was down there at the lake. Now, for those of you that know me through the page, I've talked about Jack Ring before, who I think this park's named for. He was a local guy that used to save people from drowning in the river, and he's credited with having saved over 300 people over a period of 20 years or so. Pretty well-known guy. The park here running right between the river and Lake Contrary. This is their grand opening celebration for the park in 1910. They advertised shoot the chute in America, fishing, boating, bathing, free picnic grounds. They did everything they could to get people to go down there to party and celebrate and get together with their family and friends. They taught swimming. This is the swimming director. I've been looking for his name. I haven't found it yet, but he probably taught most of his people in St. Joe to swim when they were kids at the time. Now, around 1908, the government sent the troops here to St. Joseph for a military exhibition, and this is them at on Francis Street at 5th Street. It would have been right there where, if you're familiar with St. Joe now, the little restaurant there, Bracey's. That's it. That's the same building you can see right there on the left of the picture. But they would have maybe been standing right in the Hotel Rubidoux when they took this picture. What they were doing is advertising the military exhibition that was going on down at the lake. And what they had done, there was 5,000 troops that showed up for this exhibition. This is the cavalry exhibition photograph of it, where they were demonstrating all their skills with the cavalry. This is the artillery contest, where they would demonstrate how they'd set up the wagons and the cannons and whatnot. This is all really good training, what turned out to be for the getting ready for World War I. Actually, it's right about 10 years before that. So this is the hospital corps. They're demonstrating all their abilities to save lives at the time on the battlefield. They had this is the bareback squad. They demonstrated their trick riding. Horse was the king. Of course, they didn't have tanks and all that back then. So this is the cavalry showing off. The little thing in the sky looks like a flying saucer or the lighting system. I noticed it earlier in the photograph. Of course, sailing was the main draw. This is what it looked like. On the right is the casino, and behind that would be the Lotus Club. On the left is the boathouse, and the buildings in between, I haven't had any luck finding what they are. This is from a postcard put out by the Mantrek Company around 1900. You can see the boating was pretty popular. I can't imagine all those people in a sailboat, but it must have been a lot of fun. They advertised in about 1900 also, or earlier, that they had an electric fountain, and I never could find anything about it, but in the memoirs of J.B. Moss, I put it in the book called Gathering Moss. They had a woman that was dancing on this platform to different electric lights that were going on, and it didn't last very long. I think they were just learning that you didn't mix electricity and light, or electricity and water. It didn't last very long, but it was really impressive for the people of the time. They were really proud of it at the time. This is the Lake Contrary Casino. This is how it looked when it was really it was up and going. The top floor was kind of an exhibition hall, and they would have their gatherings and dinners and whatnot on the top floor. The downstairs was kind of a hall that the people could go see a different kinds of show or whatnot. And I was able to find a photograph of the actual the inside of the hall, and it was pretty good size. You can see down there in the very bottom that there's some men standing in the orchestra pit, and they're getting ready for some type of a performance. But this is what they did for fun on the inside when it probably inclement weather and whatnot. Of course, there was always a good time to drink beer, and this is when they had a German beer garden there on the top floor, about 1914. This is on the second floor of the casino. They also did these different kinds of events that would attract crowds. You're probably familiar with the Orphan Train. About that time, they started advertising Adopt a Baby Night, and this is where you would come in and meet a child to adopt. baby night. They had Indian pony races, which I'm not sure where it went, but they would race ponies and advertise the different kinds of Indian ways. They were very impressed with that kind of a lifestyle, and did all sorts of things around it. This again is on the second floor of the casino. And when things got really boring, they had pillow fights. So this is their pillow fight night. It seems like everything was done on a Wednesday night. They always advertised this Wednesday we'd have pillow fights or Indian races, or you could adopt an orphan. This is how the Lotus Club ultimately looked at the end, or towards the end. It was a really nice hotel from what I can tell. It caught fire in the 1920s, and due to somebody that was working on the roof, a tenor, the fire got away on a windy day and burned it all up. But that was a little bit later on. They would also do some sailing at night, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think the lights on the shoreline are supposed to be the cabins that they rented out to guests to come there and camp out. There's a lady that's standing on the front of the boat in this picture, who's in a whole bunch of different pictures of the lake, and I think they just changed the skyline, or whether it's daylight or night, in a lot of them. But this, there was a special name for her. I don't recall what it was, but they like Standing Mary or something like that. A different story. But it all went downhill, so they called out the guy, the Ingersoll brothers. In 1902, the Ingersoll Engineering Company was called in to kind of update the amusement park and the rides and whatnot. They owned a company on the East Coast that produced all the different rides, the roller coasters, and they manufactured it. All the equipment used there. The brothers created the first chain of amusement parks in the country, and they all became really popular for their architecture and their interesting attractions. But I think the reason that W.T. Van Brunt enjoyed them is because everything they did involved use of electricity, and he was in the electricity business. So one of the most popular things that they had at almost every one of the parks was the Shoot the Chute, which was a pretty famous or popular attraction here in St. Joseph. Anybody that remembers the park at all will tell you about the Shoot the Chute. And what that is a kind of a log, a boat ride that would, a little trolley car would take you to the top of this ramp and send you down the ramp into the water, make a big splash. You can see there's a little a white line that goes across the ramp there. That's a bridge. People would gather on there and watch the boats come down and make their little splash. And I was able to find this other postcard that shows this is the view from the top. It's a little blurry because I blew it up to be able to see it, but you can see the bridge down below. And that's kind of interesting because you can, in this picture here, you can see that people did stand there and watch the boats come down. They probably got wet. The lagoon was also used as like an emergency supply for water in case there was a fire. So they used it as kind of a fire suppression system too at the time. It was pretty popular with, they had a lot of different water features that the brothers worked on. They had like a tunnel of love that people could go through and for a little privacy on a boat ride. And it ended up being Mother's Day on the Shoot the Chute. So I guess it must have worked for the lovers lane there. This is what the Midway looked like at the time. It was in ticketing. That's either the roller coaster back behind it or the Shoot the Chute. It's kind of hard to say. I really didn't see the original layout, but it's there was always a lot of people there. This picture is interesting that it shows Bob Ingersoll with Palmer Clark standing at one of the little attractions here. It looks like they were selling drinks and snacks and whatnot. So the gears and wheels and all the moving parts were all manufactured by the Ingersoll brothers, who they manufactured these rides and shipped them all over the country for different parks. Fred, the older brother, he had a chain of 44 different amusement parks going at one time, and this is, I think that's Ingersoll on the roller coaster here. But if you look close, right in the center of this picture, there's a guy sitting on a ball next to that round circle. We're trying to figure out what that guy was doing. It was either a way to test the rails or something. It looks like they were trying to do a loop-the-loop there. Who knows what they were actually doing? But this is even the cops look like Keystone cops standing there. So it would have been the early 1900s when this was taken. So this is Bob Ingersoll. When he arrived in St. Joe in 1902, they didn't know him very well, but by the time of his death in 53, just about everybody in town knew him or knew about him anyway. He got here right after the Spanish-American War and showed up down at the Transit House Hotel, which is used to sit right across the street from, if you know St. Joe, it's the Hoof and Horn steakhouse down there by the stockyards. Well, just across the street from it was a little shooting gallery. And so Bob went up there and they had this offer that if he could break all these targets and that you would win $3. And so he asked the guy, is this still valid? And the guy said, yeah, it's still valid. So Bob loaded up a rifle and real quick, he broke all the targets. And the owner was a little bit shocked. He hadn't seen anybody like that. And he goes, I'm sorry, the offer was still good, but I don't have $3 to pay you. So he got kind of robbed out of it, but he didn't realize that Bob was the national champion in rifles and target pistols. And so it really wasn't anything to him. In fact, they used his picture in this cartridge company used his picture on some of their advertising. He had put like 50 shots through a nickel-sized target 50 feet away or something. It was a remarkable bunch of shooting. But when he got here, I think he was just coming to help organize the amusement park. Well, ultimately he met Miss Anna, who became his wife. And Miss Anna, she managed a lot of the concession areas and the people working in the park. And she played a really big role in the development of the whole thing. But they were partners down at the lake for probably 40 some years when it was all said and done. This is from when the park was fairly new. You can see the lagoon for the shoot there by the Midway. And the advertise that sailing on everything. This is her. I'm using my mouse as a pointer. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can see it or not. But that's her standing in front of where it says candy there at the concession stand. To the left is the merry-go-round house, and behind that is the roller coaster and part of the Midway. So this is what it looked like when it was still fairly new, and looks like they were getting ready for the season there at the time. So in 1909, when the Ringling Brothers circus was coming to town, it was summertime, it was really hot, and they invited the circus to bring the elephants down for a swim. And it looks like they let a lot of people know about it because it drew record crowds to the lake for everybody to get a good look at it. The elephants enjoyed it a lot, and they had a hard time getting them out of the water. They wouldn't come out, but finally they got the matriarch of the herd to head out, and so the rest of them followed them. But the crowds, you can see all the people lined up there on the shores and at the casino there, watching these elephants swim. Of course, you know, the figure eight, the roller coasters, everything, it was free to get into the park, but then you had to buy tickets to ride everything. And so it had to have been a pretty good profit-making proposition for W.T. Van Brunt. This is one of my favorite pictures here. This is taken of Lake Contrary in 1929 when they were doing the Birdwing Aircraft Company here in St. Joseph, down there by the lake, or down by the river. This is what it looked like from the air. That's a casino there on the lower portion of it. You can just barely see the roller coaster back behind it, and some of the layout of it. The next one shows a little bit different angle, and you can see the ball field and the casino up there on the upper left corner of the whole thing. I use software to colorize it. These are all actually an old black and white photographs, but the different features stand out a little bit better. This is what the merry-go-round building looked like at the end. This is after it already flooded and they were getting ready to close it all down. Of course, this is how it looked when it was still underwater. It's the Big Dipper, one of the roller coasters. In 1953, this is Anna and Bob Ingersoll. It's one of the last pictures they ever had made of themselves, or the last one that we've ever found. So it's them towards the end of their life. When he died, she took it over for quite some time, and was able to make it work. But flooding and it was all kind of old and run down at the time. That pretty much, the flood pretty much spelled the end of it all. So this is where you can find them today. They're at Mount Mora. This is their gravesite. It's kind of a love story of these two because they loved the people that were going there. Everybody that knew them loved them. There's stories of the children at his funeral where they were talking about how he had allowed them to take free rides on the different kinds of attractions there, especially the roller coasters, whenever they had church gatherings and whatnot. He was a really beloved guy that everybody in town knew. And so that's kind of the end of the show. I think we'll have to open it up for questions. Yeah. So who's muted? If I can get the chat opened up here.
Sarah, can you stop sharing Gary's screen?
I'm trying to.
I think Sarah can probably help you with it. There you go. So we're going to take some questions from Gary. If you have questions, please go ahead and you can either type them in the chat or you can jump on. The first question is, the lake still there? I Googled it and it just shows the river.
The lake is still there, or really a pale shadow of it. I don't think anybody could drown in it anymore. I think you can walk across it. It's been silted up since the Corps of Engineer changed or channelized the river. So it has a problem with silt, and it's kind of filled up. There's not much. There's nothing left of the park that I can know of. It's interesting that a friend of mine with a metal detector, or his father, found a $20 gold piece in the area that was the horse racing track. So there are still remnants down there. Yeah, the lake's there.
I've actually been swimming in it, so yeah, it is there, but it's not very deep. When did the last building disappear, or was torn down?
My dad took me there when I was 4 years old in 1964, and I remember it. He showed it to me and told me they were tearing it down. And I think one of the last places was the merry-go-round. There was a local doctor here named Grimes that collected all the different animals, and I think he bought quite a few of the animals that were used in the ride, the merry-go-round. I've heard that the merry-go-round at Patey House is related to that merry-go-round, but I don't really know that that's true. I thought the animals were sold and kind of dispersed across the country. So I think in the 1960s is when the last buildings were torn down.
Gary, Joanne had a question. Are you planning on writing a book about Lake Contrary?
No, I'm not writing another book yet about that. I just did this last book, Gathering Moss, and just as I was gathering steam on that, we got all shut down. So if you need a book, we do have Gathering Moss. It talks about Lake Contrary a little bit.
I have a question for you, Gary, and maybe other people have questions that they can put in the chat as well. But I noticed you didn't have any flood pictures, the Lake Contrary flood pictures in there.
They're kind of sad, actually. The water really went up and ruined the whole thing, and there are pictures out there available all in flood. I was trying to approach it from the history of the whole amusement park and the whole thing, and the end of it isn't nearly as exciting to me as the beginning of it all. The people involved in it in getting the whole thing started caught my attention. I probably could have made it a lot longer and showed a lot of the flood damage, but it's kind of depressing during this stay-at-home part of our life. I don't think we need anything more depressing.
So there's a comment over in the chat. Joe Gray says that he rode the Shoot to Shoots as a child in the 1930s. Yeah,
that thing was around for a long time, and Joe has really good memories of it there. He would have been there when it was really at its height as far as an amusement park goes. So I've heard some really interesting stories from that time.
Joanne, if you guys have the ability to do the video and Joe wants to get on and tell us a little bit about what it was like there, we would love to hear from him, if that's possible. That'd be very, very neat.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some of that myself.
We'll see if that happens or not, but we'll take a few more questions. Does anybody else have questions for Gary about the history of Lake Contrary? Oh, here they are. Joanne, unmute your microphone.
Hi, Joe.
Okay.
I'm muted. It says muted by host.
You're on.
Oh, now can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. All right. Do you have any other statements, Dad?
No, but we used to go down there as children. Started in the late 20s when I first was in school. My mother came from the South End, and she was real proud of that. And we had a lot of fun down there as kids. That I rode all those old things that were there at that time, and it was really something we look forward to.
When I was in high school in the 1960s, my brother and I would each fill up a tank of gas and go down and water ski there. I would ski on one tank and he would ski on the other. And we went very early in the morning when the lake was like a sheet of glass. It was very calm. I don't imagine the residents liked it very much. But
I participated in some of the regattas that they had on the lake. I was in the Sea Scouts at the time, and I imagine I was about 17, 18 at the top, and we used to get together with other scout groups and have races on there. Never won any, I don't think, but we had fun.
Joe, somebody has a question for you. They said, what was your favorite activity at Lake Contrary?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. What favorite what?
What was your favorite thing at Lake Contrary to do?
Oh, well, just riding the rides, I guess, would be the thing, because I liked several of them. They had a very impressive collection for a city of our size.
One of the interesting stories there was how J.B. Moss from the book, he said that he went there with John Patey, who liked to sail, and John Patey and Moss would turn the boat into an ice boat, and they go ice sailing there with the boat. Did you do any sailing down there, Joe?
Excuse me?
Did you go sailing there?
Yeah, a lot of times. I did it when I was in the Sea Scouts, and then afterwards we had a little cat boat. It was called a butterfly. It was just a scaled down model of a sea scow. And we used to sail all over that lake and had lots of races with just friends, and it was a great time.
Joanne, somebody else is asking if Joe recalls any of the prices of the rides.
do you remember what the rides cost? What were the prices on the rides then?
I don't remember at the earliest time when they started charging, when my mom and dad quit paying for them. I think the earliest prices I paid was like 10 cents to go down to Chutes or something like that. It was very cheap. You could go down there with $1 and get plenty of rides.
Joanne, I was wondering, what kind of food did they sell in the concessions?
I didn't hear.
What kind of food did they sell in the concessions?
You know, I can't tell you too much about that. I didn't usually eat there. I'd rather spend my money on the rides than eating.
Very fun.
Yeah. So they had a dining hall and they had concessions.
Yeah, they had concessions.
You didn't touch on any of the segregation with Lake Contrary. Didn't they used to have a day like once a month or something where they would let the African Americans?
Yeah, they did actually. He was a real popular man. Ingersoll was with the black population here in St. Joseph. He was beloved by everybody, regardless of the race.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, the rides were like a nickel and a dime, and they offered things like candies, and I would imagine that there was a lot of Chase candy there.
There was. I remember that.
They used a lot of local things, so they supported a lot of local businesses. I would imagine anything that was manufactured in St. Joe, edible, was available there. The trains would have special price tickets where they would have a concert down at the lake, and the trains would bring in passenger cars full of people at a special price that would include the price of admission into the park. The whole idea was to keep the place moving all the time.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you all for joining us. We're gonna go ahead and stop our Facebook Live. So everybody who's on Facebook with us, thank you so much. We appreciate you watching this program on Facebook. We're gonna have it recorded and shared on Facebook as well. And then if you guys that are on the Zoom chat would like to stay and ask Gary a few questions personally, you can do that. But thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Gary. As he said, yeah, he has his book, new book out, Gathering Moss, and that's for sale in the St. Joseph Museum gift shop and on Amazon too, right, Gary? Yes, okay. And then also next Friday, this Friday coming up at 10 a.m., we're going to do a similar presentation. Alexis Clements is going to be sharing God's Image is Ebony, and history of some of the Black Archives Museum photographs. So please join us for that if you would like. More St. Joseph history coming up, and we'll be putting together more of these programs while we're all sheltering in place. So thank you, Gary. Thank you, Joe and Joanne and Sarah Parks for helping co-host. And we will stay here for a few minutes, but I will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
That was
Joe.
wonderful.
Thank
Good
you
to
for
see you.
a great show.